Welcome to Sustainable Business Development in the Age of Coronavirus. My name is Michel Hawks, and I'm the director of the Liu Institute for Asia and Asian Studies here at the University of Notre Dame. The Liu Institute is responsible for promoting teaching and research about Asia at Notre Dame, as well as for academic engagement with universities and other constituencies in Asia. We are delighted to organize today's event in partnership with Notre Dame International, the university's international office, and with our Global Center in Hong Kong, led by Ms. Catherine Leung. Today's event is the first in a series of 3 online discussions aimed at connecting Notre Dame experts with scholars, practitioners, and audiences in Asia to discuss the theme of global fragility against the background of the current public health crisis. As an ethically grounded university with a strong sense of social engagement and promotion of the common good, Notre Dame and its faculty share deep concerns about the increased fragility of disadvantaged individuals, communities, and places around the globe. And we are committed to help work towards solutions that will prevent the return to the unsustainable practices of the old normal. To discuss the specific topic of sustainable business development, we have with us today 3 eminent speakers, all of whom will speak for 10 minutes, followed by discussion based on audience questions. Some of you have already submitted questions in advance, and you can also type questions into the Q&A window during the event. The event will finish after exactly 1 hour. Allow me now to briefly introduce our speakers in the order in which they will present. George Enderle is Professor Emeritus at the Mendoza College of Business and the Keough School of Global Affairs and a Faculty Fellow of the Liu Institute. He conducts research on the ethics of globalization, wealth creation, business and human rights, and corporate responsibilities of large and small companies. For well over 2 decades, he has been involved in teaching and research activities in China, particularly at the China-Europe International Business School, the Shanghai Advanced Institute of Finance, and Jiao Tong University. His new book, entitled Corporate Responsibility for Wealth Creation and Human Rights, is coming out with Cambridge University Press later this year. Our second speaker, William Yu, is CEO of the World Green Organization, an independent NGO based in Hong Kong and concerned with environmental conservation and environmentally related livelihood and economic affairs. William is an energy economist and climate professional. He holds a PhD in energy and environment from the University of Cambridge and is an adjunct professor at the City University of Hong Kong. Having gained valuable management experience by working at US multinationals and financial institutions, he now serves on numerous commissions and task forces for the UN and other organizations supporting green business, sustainable entrepreneurship, and social innovation. He also hosts environmental programs for radio and TV. And our third speaker, Jessica McManus-Warnell, teaches business ethics, sustainable business, and Japanese business culture at the Mendoza College of Business. And she is also a faculty fellow of the Liu Institute. She is the recipient of the 2017 United Nations Principles for Responsible Management Education North America Chapter Award for Teaching Excellence. Her research focuses on business students' values orientations, as well as on economic recovery and resilience in the wake of the Fukushima triple disaster. So these are the speakers we have lined up for you. Hopefully the technology will work with us from now on. Thank you again for your patience, and I'd like to hand over to our first speaker, Professor George Enderle.
Thank you, Michel. Thank you for organizing this panel, and with a little bit delay, we can have that discussion. What I would like to say in my short talk are a few points. One is about the broad issue of our theme, global fragility and pandemics. The second point is then about what is the role of business in all that. And then the third point is about what concrete business organizations can and should do in that age of coronavirus. To my first point and first slide, Global Fragility and Pandemic, I think, is a well-chosen title. The pandemic has caused new problems on the one hand, but also has revealed many old problems. And so I would like to just to remind or to recall a few important events and problems we got in the last few months. The first is that when we ask the World Health Organization in Geneva about statistics, they say now that more than about 12.5 million confirmed cases worldwide exist, and over 560,000 deaths worldwide happened. This is enormous, and that has never happened, at least in the last 100 years with the pandemics. That is, many people were not hurt and died because of that pandemic. The second point, and Megan can switch it to the second now, yes. The second, please. After the confirmed cases in the United States, more than about 135,000 deaths, heavy impact on essential workers like the elderly people, non-white populations, and violating many human rights. The third point is it turned out that our capitalistic economic system is enormously fragile. We had breakdowns of businesses, unemployment, interruption of global supply chains, etc. And the fourth point is that our international relations are moving away from multilateral collaboration, and it's a big danger for the whole world. In short, we can say global fragility and pandemic is a crisis of sustainability and produces increasing inequalities. That's very short, but that's the first topic of the theme of our series. The special topic is sustainable business development in time, or the age of the coronavirus. And here, I think we should be reminded, and as a professor in the business school, I told my students very often, look, business has a central role to play in our societies through investments they make, the jobs they create, the products and services they provide, and the supply chains upon which they depend. So we have to look at the role and responsibility of business. And that is not new. We have a number of several global initiatives, and I cannot go into details, but it started with the UN Global Compact in 2000, with Principles for Responsible Investment 2006, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, Sustainable Development Goals 2015, and an initiative which I would like to briefly introduce, Business for Inclusive Growth, which started last fall. Again, here sustainability and inequality are important issues. Now, we come to the third slide, and this is the front page of my new book, Corporate Responsibility for Wealth Creation and Human Rights. And what I'm trying to say here is that these are three parts. You can see the full moon. That means business, the purpose of business and the economy is to create wealth in a comprehensive sense. Not just to make money, but to create wealth. And I will explain that a little bit more later on. You can see also the red fire, that is, according to Paul Klee, the full moon. And that means human rights and the respect for human rights, not only by countries and governments, but also by business, are a very important guiding line in international and domestic business. And then you can see those dark blue and brown and gray cubes and squares. And my interpretation is this is a huge variety of companies, large and small, family enterprises, state-owned enterprises, etc. And they should be guided by the moon, by what the purpose of creating wealth and human rights, the respect for human rights. Now, I would like to go to the next slide. And what does it mean to create sustainable wealth? And you know, as you know, the term sustainability can mean so many, many things. And I still stick to the old definition by the World Commission on Development and Economy and Environment, which defines sustainability as to meet the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability to future generations to meet their own needs. And this needs for capital, namely not only economic capital, physical and financial capital, but also natural capital. That means the relation of business and societies to nature, what we take from nature and what we give back to nature. Human capital basically means healthy and educated people, and social capital, that we need trust among people in order to work together and to live together. Now, what does that mean for corporate responsibility, for creating wealth? And Megan, I would like to point to just first to two negative examples. You are all familiar with the Volkswagen scandal in Germany in 2015, when the company systematically cheated the government in terms of emissions of nitrogen and destroyed actually natural capital. Or the Wells Fargo scandal in the United States a year later, which expanded their customer bases with 2 to 3 million people without telling them, and how they destroyed actually economic capital. Two positive examples are creating human capital. I mentioned Medtronic, which I know quite well in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They had early on, for decades of years, to promote the health of people, alleviate pain, extend life, restore health. And the Grameen Bank of Mohamed Yunus, who in Bangladesh founded the microcredit movement in the 1970s already, and today has become a worldwide movement. He also got the Nobel Prize for Peace. These are 4 examples to illustrate what it means to be sustainable in terms of natural capital, economic, social, human and social capital. And it is interesting that the OECD, some years ago, when they developed a framework for well-being and sustainability, they said we need those 4 types of capital in order to have sustainability over time. Without that, and just making money cannot achieve that goal. Now, the next slide is what does it mean to respect human rights? And here, I think it's important, I refer to John Ruggie, who developed that framework for the United Nations, which was accepted by the United Nations in 2011. And they say all 30 internationally recognized human rights are at stake. That means companies can violate those rights in multiple ways. The right to life or liberty of security of the person, to right to work, safe and healthy working conditions, an adequate standard of living, healthcare, etc. So they are relevant, but that does not mean that companies have to be like governments to protect others against violations, but they have to do, and I will say more about the criteria, how this applies to the companies. So with criteria, yes, the criteria of corporate responsibility means no direct or indirect adverse human rights impact. What does that mean? Well, I just give you one example. For instance, if factory workers are exposed to hazardous working conditions without adequate safety equipment. So if they have to go to the mines, but they don't have the safety equipment, this is a violation of a human right and companies are responsible directly for that impact, regardless what the government does. Indirect adverse impacts is, for instance, the targeting of children with high sugar foods and drinks, causing child obesity. Here it is marketing. They don't hurt the children directly, but through the marketing they hurt the children. And then the third criterion is providing no contribution, but direct linkage to the company's operation or products. For instance, when a bank provides financial loans to an enterprise for business activities that in breach of agreed standards result in the eviction of families. These are a few things, but what I want to emphasize is that human rights and the fulfillment of human rights is highly fragile, and but it would give us a direction for sustainable business development, which is very important. And the last slide is, I have no time to go into details, but that's the initiative Business for Inclusive Growth, which started last year. And they have those points: advancing human rights, then building inclusive workplaces, and third, strengthening inclusions in company value chains and business. And it was signed by 38 CEOs of corporations like Accenture, BASF, L'Oreal, Johnson & Johnson, TIA, and Unilever. This is a nice example which explains how we can move towards sustainable business development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, George, for setting us off on the right path in terms of our topic and also the overall theme of our series. I think you've given us a wonderful introduction to some of the key terms that are at stake in this discussion: fragility, sustainability, wealth creation, business development. So I'm now going to turn to our next speaker, William Yu, who is going to focus, I believe, more on the microeconomic perspective, but dealing with those same themes. So very much want to welcome William once again. Great to have you with us. I know it's late for you, but we are really looking forward to your presentation. So William, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Hi, everybody. Hope you are well. Greetings from Hong Kong. This is Dr. William Yu from World Green Organization based in Hong Kong. So George has shared with us very important insights from a macro perspective. So I try to share my part on a micro level from a company perspective. So I think during pandemic, everything looks very much different than what we are used to. I have some observations using 3 dimensions. The first one is economic dimension. I think you all will agree the global pandemic has put either small or large corporations to real tests in terms of their competence in financial, people, and business model. For many, the pandemic exposed weaknesses and rendered many traditional strengths irrelevant. So small businesses will be the hardest hit, I believe. But seems large businesses have a better chance of surviving. But it depends. Those listed companies with manufacturing capacity now come to standstill, are quite problematic. Also, we will encounter these kinds of challenges every month, like the questions like, compared to the past, recurring income will be reduced as expected. Increasing difficulty in income forecast, fluctuation between month-by-month income, but expenditure level remains unchanged. What can we do? So, so that's for the economic side. Okay. Second, I would say the social dimension. So for the social dimension, in external setting, we all know social distancing. All these public gathering restrictions have changed the format of business activities, especially for retail and catering business, shifting the business from offline to online. Internally, pandemic also helped drive a very significant cultural shift. For example, people working from home and connecting with colleagues now via video conferencing platforms. So it's not only a matter of change in technology, I would say. Again, in this dimension, we encounter different kinds of questions every day. For example, should we cancel the event in 4 weeks? If we cancel the event, will that affect our income and clients' relationship? How about the safety of our employees in outdoor activities? Lots of questions. Okay, the third dimension, environmental dimension, according to the United Nations, UNDP, the science is clear that if we keep exploiting wildlife and destroying our ecosystem, then we can expect to see a steady stream of these diseases, the pandemic, in the years ahead. So now there is a term, zoonotic diseases, or you call it zoonosis. So that is to describe a disease that has passed into the human population from an animal source. So according to the UNEP, 75% of all emerging infectious diseases in humans cross from animals. That means the pandemic will come again if we don't change our land management, agriculture, food production, food security, space to raise the cattle, and also the isolation to human being. In terms of the environmental impact brought by pandemic, you can imagine tons of face masks will dispose onto the landfill, overuse of chemicals days by days, causing secondary pollution to our ecosystem. There are a lot. So no doubt our business, our economies are in survival mode in short term. So what we are asking every day is, where has all the business gone? What are the new opportunities? My current clients are also in trouble. How to change my companies to adopt to the new normal? But how about in midterm and long term? How are we going to handle our social and environmental responsibility? So I have spent already 5 minutes to manage your expectation. I'm not here to tell you all the solutions, for these extraordinary times. I'm also struggling, but I just want to deepen my thinking together with you through some interaction. I think all we need to do is to prepare ourselves to face the new normal. To survive, we need a kind of adjustment, both our attitude and the operational model. The title of the July edition of Economist is COVID-19 is here to stay. The world is working out how to live with it. Okay, we should prepare ourselves to live with the uncertainty for quite some time. Our work life has been completely disrupted, and so is our business. I think it's silly to believe that in the aftermath of such a large disaster, that everything will return to normalcy. Although it takes courage to stop doing what used to work and leave the comfort zone, now there is no business as usual. We should consider using disaster preparedness mode or emergency mode to cope with the current and future operation. Are we ready? Are we prepared? Internally, maybe we should encourage our staff to perform proactively and enter new areas of business to explore new opportunities. But to assure them at the same time, risk-taking is allowed without fatal consequence. Clear and frequent communications are also needed, including good and bad news with our staff. Also to engage them with some good news, small progress, achievement, in order to raise the morale. Unfortunately, you might need to consider to weed out any misfit or underperformance and keep the good people on board. So in terms of operation, for companies, I know the planning mode now is in a very, very, very short term. So we have already adopted changing mode. That is to change our plan along the way, modify alongside with our execution. So it's no exaggeration to make our planning and business development pandemic oriented. Say, for example, in our event planning, we should take social distancing restriction into account to digitalize our physical workshop into online one. Maybe I can give you an idea. If you are running, say, for example, curtain business, okay, say, for example, curtain, you sell the curtain. So what will you do in midterm? You may want to include a product line using antiviral fabric, right? In short term, to create additional business from your existing client, what will you do? You will offer an additional service by adding a disinfection coating to an existing curtain product. Okay, for external, I believe many existing clients in traditional business are in trouble. So unfortunately, we need to survive. So we need to approach companies. Nowadays are thrift these days, okay? So go and check what kind of new service and solutions they are looking for, also for the existing client. So we need to re-engineer our organization to become a fast learning organization, to pick up new knowledge, act fast, take measurable risks, and understand the industry concentration and competition. So customer requirements also change, their expectation, their perception. For example, more transparent. You might need an open kitchen to show the food with very high hygiene standards nowadays, or higher safety. Say you are running a gym, okay, to do exercise, you need to show the disinfection frequency and air filtration function. So I think we need to change our mindset. We not only need synergy nowadays, or even NMA, I think we need to help each other to go through the difficulties. So maybe we no longer in a competition mode, but in a co-create, co-design, collaboration mode, especially for medium size of business. So as you will expect, a consolidation in industry will happen. The largest with most resources will take all. The weakness will disappear. Finally, as an entrepreneur, as well as an environmentalist, I think in this pandemic, our planet has already delivered the strongest warning today that humanity must change. Our economy is exposed with fragility, right? Okay, but shutting down business is not the proper response. Only we need to rebuild the new business, new economic model that can work with the nature, not against it. Then it will last long. So the pandemic is a public incident, a global disaster that affects citizens, the public, business sector, and government. So the triology of these three key players need to develop an integration approach to address to develop a solution that is a cross-discipline solution covering commercial, social, medical, and environmental. So we need a new paradigm shift to a more sustainable business model. The customer will turn to those companies with more neighborhood spirit and can change themselves quickly, I think can survive. Okay, that's for my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, William, and thank you for taking us into the territory of actual potential solutions and changes for the future. And thank you for raising so many excellent examples, which I'm sure we can talk more about during the discussion. So we've had the sort of the conceptual framework, we've had the sort of discussion of where we are now and what needs to be done. And for our next speaker, as Jessica McManus-Warnell, who, as I mentioned, is a highly decorated teacher in our business school, we're turning to the question of, well, what about pedagogy? What about teaching business students to change, to help to change, to make the kind of changes that William just outlined? So I'm delighted now to hand over to Professor McManus-Warnell, and Jessica, all yours.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks, George and William. So I'm speaking about the role of business education. And I think it's important that if we're considering business and sustainable development, we think about how the next generation is going to engage with these issues. So I've taught this course required for business students at our Notre Dame Mendoza College of Business since 2008. That means I have the privilege of working with about 400 undergraduates each year. And of course, we know that businesses have tremendous potential to affect the lives of human beings. We've heard many of the ways this evening. And we know that this impact can be destructive, but we also know that many of our best and brightest are drawn to the enterprise of business, its energy, its influence, innovation, it's the force for good it has the potential to be. So the ways that we teach business matter. At Mendoza, our goal is to equip our students to become effective ethical business people with a framework to grow the good in business through teaching, research, and engagement with stakeholders. And in our teaching specifically, an important goal is to make the realities and complexities of socially and environmentally sustainable business, to make them accessible and compelling to the students. So what do business schools and colleges and universities broadly have to offer during a crisis like the pandemic? I see three of the most important roles for academia as first, equipping future decision makers and stakeholders with competencies and sensibilities informed by ethical consideration. Second, through research, providing quality data and analyses to help inform practice and policy. And third, in convening diverse groups of stakeholders to work collaboratively towards solutions. So first, if we think about sensibilities in our students and fostering those, a critical place to start these days, of course, is acknowledging, like we've heard, that the pandemic is illuminating and exacerbating inequities, both among and within countries. We also know that the catastrophic effects of the pandemic reflect our interdependence with each other and with the natural world. These are business issues and they are moral issues. So from topics like worker safety to sustainable supply chains, we will never run out of content to explore in a business ethics class. In challenging times, I think we're also hearing a lot about teaching resilience. It's getting a lot of attention in some of the scholarly literature in the media. And typically when we define resilience as we're thinking recovery from crisis or misfortune, adversity, strain, springing back into shape after a personal challenge, or with organizations or communities or nations, healing after a rupture like a natural disaster or a pandemic. I think it can be an elusive concept. We know resilience is a good thing and quantifying it would help us understand and foster it, but its definition and measurement is not standardized. In addition, if we simply advocate for resilience, it can be problematic. And I think we're seeing some of this in the discourse related to the pandemic in other areas like racial injustice. And in the example I'll mention shortly. And what I mean simply is that if we focus only on individual resilience at the expense of considering structural inequities, it's an omission that may absolve those in power from any responsibility. And the last point on resilience, I think, is to say, do we mean recovery when we say resilience? And so here we might think about the difference between simply returning to some baseline of minimal operating standards after a challenge, and instead think about flourishing. At its most powerful, resilience is progressing beyond surviving to thriving, learning from adversity, becoming wiser, becoming better. So it's a complex idea. And to help us think about engaging students around these topics, I'd like to tell you just a bit about an experiential learning project that I've been coordinating. And this is one of many opportunities for our Notre Dame students to engage in experiential learning, which we think is a critical way to extend teaching and learning outside the classroom, because being there alongside those who've been affected by whatever it is being studied, it offers a much greater potential for learning and for more informed meaningful service, meaningful engagement. So this example is a collaboration among multidisciplinary colleagues, all of whom are fellows of the Liu Institute. So from arts and letters, we have professors Noriko Hanabusa and Anna Geltzer. The College of Engineering, we've been working with Professor Kevin Walsh, and with me from management and organization at Mendoza, and several wonderful students, we've been looking into some issues in Japan. So I've done some research with colleagues in Japan over the years. Several years now, we've taken students to Tokyo for a short-term immersion course on Japanese business and culture. Just over a year ago, then we incorporated a research component. And our goal is to explore economic and community recovery and resilience in the wake of disasters. So the Fukushima earthquake, tsunami, nuclear tragedy has been our initial focus. And we know, like many global tragedies, Fukushima is both a natural and a man-made disaster. It has environmental and economic implications. Of course, the devastation of the earthquake and the tsunami was exponentially magnified by the nuclear disaster that was the result of problematic business practice and inadequate government oversight. Our trip this summer with the students was postponed due to the pandemic, but our faculty team had the opportunity to travel to Fukushima last year with support from Liu to lay the groundwork for this collaborative work with stakeholders, including scholars and community members and business people in Japan. So now from afar, our faculty student team is beginning to explore topics like crisis management and entrepreneurial, small and large business response to disasters. And these topics, some of them we're developing in collaboration with our contacts in Japan. Everything we learn will be shared with them. And our hope is that our topics are relevant to other contexts, including the pandemic response. I could speak for hours about our trip to Fukushima. It included really heartbreaking moments, really inspiring moments. We saw, many images that will stay in my mind. One, a school building, you could see the, desks and books and backpacks and artwork frozen just as they'd left to evacuate. Another school with watermarks from the tsunami. One that was kind of mundane that stays with me, we saw employees' cars at an abandoned nursing home, and in one of the car's back seat, there was a full basket of laundry sitting there, of course, since 2011. So we saw these abandoned homes, we saw businesses being reclaimed by nature, we saw memorials to lives lost. But in these communities, some of the communities that are able to reopen, we saw these wonderful examples of perseverance and commitment to the well-being of other people. There was a couple operating an inn, another couple opening a restaurant, both small businesses that have become gathering spots for community members and activists, both started by young entrepreneurs who felt a responsibility to rebuild. We met with teachers, including one of our amazing Notre Dame alums who are working with returning families and with local government officials to support rebuilding neighborhoods. We saw buildings in rubble and a huge port by the seaside, of course, a hub of the regional economy. It had been completely flattened, but we saw scores of people working there to rebuild smarter and safer. We found that the people we met in Fukushima define resilience, and we can learn from them. And of course, it's possible to consider experiences like Fukushima without acknowledging the interconnectedness of business and communities, and without acknowledging that both are operating within the natural environment. And of course, the frequency and cost of these natural and man-made disasters continue to proliferate around the world, especially within the context of climate change. And bringing these realities to life for students, we think these future decision makers, connecting them with stakeholders, providing frameworks to help them make sense of what they're seeing and to consider solutions. This can be the work of educators. Quickly to the second and third role I mentioned. The second role, we said, what do scholars have to offer? And as William noted, a concern would be that businesses will fail to prioritize responsibility in the face of acute challenges like the pandemic. And this again is where scholars are, I think, and should be sharing evidence and support for what the data tell us, which is that, for example, those companies characterized by meaningful incorporation of strategies for social and environmental sustainability, they fare better in times of crisis. I think this time is a forced reset. Companies are already expending time and resources of significant amounts managing their pandemic responses. So the nature and quality of these responses can move us toward more equitable societies. How then can businesses take these steps? You know, there are initiatives like those mentioned today, many by George. I liked this quote from a Forbes magazine article that described the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a hack for business, a quick, a precise inroad, a blueprint for aligning business strategy with purpose. The Global Compact has, you know, with this is the arm that is about engagement for businesses with the SDGs. It has over 12,000 signatory companies, organizations in 160 countries across diverse industries. They're exchanging information, lessons learned, best practices, and reporting on progress toward the goals. And each of these includes the idea of engaging stakeholders. We're seeing these movements around the world demanding worker protections, equity and inclusion, responsible action toward climate challenge. Many of these movements, of course, are led by young people, and perhaps out of this pandemic, we will become wiser with the optimism that young people will do better than has been done. The final role that I mentioned for academia is the power to convene. So we're experiencing this today through this series. Colleges and universities have the ability and the responsibility to convene stakeholders. These collaborations bring together people from diverse roles and perspectives for civil dialogue to listen to one another. And this is, you know, invaluable in helping guide our collective responses to global challenges. So thank you. I'll stop now.
Thank you very much indeed, Jessica. So, and many thanks to our audience for sticking with us. I know we're now beyond the original time that we said we would finish. With your permission, we're going to go on for another 15, 20 minutes or so and see if we can engage our distinguished panelists into a bit of discussion. There's some questions I sort of want to raise based on what audience members sent in advance. You're also welcome to type questions into the Q&A button on your screen. Panelists, I will call you out by name to answer a question, but if you want to intervene or respond, just raise your hand, I can see you, and then I will move over to you as well. So we've heard a lot about sustainability and resilience and about some of the changes that are going to have to come with the, in the period after the pandemic, if there's ever going to be a period after the pandemic, right? So a question that seems to be on the minds of a lot of the people in our audience is that, well, to what extent is sustainable business actually going to be the way out? Or is it actually going to be even harder to be a sustainable business? Are the traditional businesses that are maybe not so sustainable actually going to be more resilient towards the pandemic? Are businesses going to lose their interest in sustainability? So I want to direct that to you first, George. I mean, is that the real challenge, that maybe sustainability is actually going to be one of the victims of the current crisis?
Well, to answer this question, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. To answer this question, I think it's really important to be clear about what we mean by sustainable business or traditional business, you know. And sustainable, as William defined it, and as I also define it, as three dimensions: economic dimension, a social dimension, and an environmental dimension. And that can be measured with frameworks from the Global Reporting Initiative, etc. And that has started not now or a few weeks ago, but it had started in the 1990s. And so that's why I said the pandemic, on the one hand, we have new problems, but we also still have to face old problems. And sustainability or sustainable business, I think, has really or there are many good examples of business how to bring together economic, social, and environmental dimensions. And just to add, this not only businesses, but they are under the pressure of investors who want to invest in businesses which are successful. And that is interesting to see that United Nations Principles for Responsible Business have those three criteria: environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and governance sustainability. And they are looking at the companies very clearly now during the pandemic and afterwards, if they really live up to those requirements which are necessary for economic reasons, but also for environmental and social reasons. And I think that pressure today is pretty strong, and I'm hopeful that the pandemic can learn or teach us that we realize the fragility that the model of just making money and maximizing profit, which looks at money and economics, but not at the environment, does not work anymore.
Okay, on that note, I want to direct that to William now. I mean, William, do you see a major change happening in the way in which businesses, the public, the environment, and so on interact? Do you see companies becoming more socially responsible?
I think now is in the crossroad. It could be a turning point for the future business development. I say, for example, a very new study conducted by Intertrust is overwhelming majority, around 88% of private equity investors. So to echo George's comment, they plan to step up their effort to manage and measure environmental, social, and governance performance, what we call ESG. So they will step up in this aspect of, so that will help to drive companies to pay more effort to invest more on the environmental and social side. Especially for the social aspect, we have two meanings of social aspect, okay? For sustainability, social refers to community, refers to the human part, but for the ESG, S stands for more internal, orientation. So that's for the employees. So how companies treat their employee, especially during the pandemic, whether they care about the employee safety, they care about the health of their employees, they offer sufficient level of training to employees. So all these are related to social aspect in ESG. I think both requires attention, and now I think is the company whether they only care about the economic recovery and put all the resources in all these economic development, or they start to realize if they keep ignoring the environmental aspect, that will bring another kind of disaster that also hurt the business, although in an indirect way. But we all realize now the pandemic is part of the result of climate change, the climate change speed up the spread of the pathogens, and also as I said, the zoonotic diseases, all this. So hopefully from this lesson, companies start to change. I hope, hopefully I will see this happen.
Thank you. We have some really interesting questions coming in. Jessica, I wonder if I could ask you to pick up on a question by our eminent alumnus, KY Chu, who says, with COVID-19 and aftermath, would we see a trend of countries trying to develop internal consumption or growth models, thus slowing or reversing globalization? We haven't mentioned globalization yet, so I think this is a good opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. That's a hardball question. That's great. I think that I'll tell you, in my classes, often we hear students question the underlying premise that we can equate sustainable business with profitable business, and often that it all kind of sounds great and moral and right and good, but is there a persuasive business case? And I think in the context of the pandemic and in the context of what we're seeing within and between countries and the way they operate, the case is even stronger than it has been for sustainable business. There's been research, for example, out of the financial crisis, the global crisis in 2008, and we know that those companies that take the long view and that do things like responsibly manage supply chains, they have financial advantages as well. They can be more nimble. They attract good talent with respect to students. They retain good talent. And as ESG investing increases and the kind of desire that young investors are indicating for the way they want to guide their investment strategies, I think these are only going to increase. I try to be optimistic about it, and I think that done well and done responsibly and done in collaboration with these global efforts like the Global Compact and like the new initiative that he mentioned about development and business, international exchange and globalization can continue to flourish. I think it needs to continue to flourish.
That's great. Thank you very much. The technology is working great now. It's working so well that I'm even receiving messages in the background saying it is about time to start wrapping up. So I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds to give the audience your main takeaway, right? So I know we cannot provide any answers to all the questions, but if there's one thing on this particular topic, sustainable business during and after the pandemic, what is it that you would want your audience to bear in mind after they press the leave button today? George, why don't you go first?
Yes. Well, one lesson I think we can and many have learned from the pandemic is that we are much more aware of how interdependent we are, how dependent we are of our colleagues, of our companies, of our business partners, and of nature and government. And so that awareness of depending to each other should help us to develop a stronger sense of solidarity. And I think we have to not to look only at bad examples, but good examples of companies which have practiced it and are doing more. And as I try to say, to create wealth means really to be innovative now that we are faced with those enormous challenges of the pandemic.
Okay. William, your message to Hong Kong and to the world.
Yes, thank you. I have read some research done by archaeologists. So they seems to to think environmental exploitation is bound to continue, if not accelerate, in the coming years. So maybe we have a short-term benefits from the environmental rebound this year, but it will not last long if our business corporation do not take any real actions or a more sustainable business model that we need to adopt. So why we need to change? I think we must be proactive in order to avoid another pandemic. Another should not take diseases. So otherwise, once we overcome the current one, COVID-19, there will be COVID-20, COVID-21, COVID-22. So human health, animal health, planetary health cannot be separated. So we should plan our response based on a more sustainable model. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jessica, you get the last word.
Sure, thanks. So I guess I would say start with acknowledging our interconnectedness with each other and with the natural environment. ensure center decision-making around purpose. So to commit or recommit to purpose beyond short-term financial growth. And you know, that can be done, like George mentioned, by acknowledging that wealth and prosperity encompasses not only financial metrics, but indicators of well-being, like human capital. And then I think to do all these things, companies can explore the resources that are available. The Global Compact, the Interpretive Guide to Business and Human Rights with specific examples. We have a group in Mendoza, the Notre Dame Deloitte Center for Ethical Leadership, which includes a weekly newsletter for companies with guidance on ethical business. So I think information is out there, and I hope companies continue to engage with these resources, learn from each other's best practices, and keep things moving forward.
Thank you very much. And thank you, all of you, for your contributions to this discussion and for your patience as we were sorting out the technical problems. Also, many thanks to the audience. Before you leave, I wanted to draw your attention to our next event in this series, which is on your screen now, the UN Sustainable Development Goals in the Age of Coronavirus. Another virtual discussion, this one co-hosted with our Notre Dame Global Gateway in Beijing. Speakers are Professor Diane Desgiato here from the Keough School of Global Affairs and Professor Chen Yifeng from Peking University. We look forward to your participation and your attendance at that event, which hopefully will start exactly on time on July the 20th at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. So once again, thank you all very much. For more information about this event and any of our other events, please go to our website, asia.nd.edu. Thank you and stay safe. Bye-bye.